Last week we talked about every president's greatest accomplishment, but now this week we're going to be talking trash about our 45 greatest public servants, those who have served as President of the United States of America. So, wasting no time, George Washington. His failure to stop political parties. While he did try to, and he said that political parties would be the downfall of the country, he was a Federalist in all but name. And that really harmed the country because he, as I said, he did not want political parties to be a thing, but he didn't really do much to prevent it. He said, I don't want it to happen, but he didn't really take no action. John Adams, the Alien and Sedition Acts. I mean, how is a founding father on board with violating the First Amendment? He was a Federalist, so he did not want the Bill of Rights, but, I mean, making it illegal to criticize the government totally goes against the First Amendment of the Constitution. The act went out of order on March 3rd, 1801, the day before he left office because he lost the election of 1800 to Thomas Jefferson. As for Thomas Jefferson, his biggest mistake would be the Embargo Act of 1807. Second term curse, really affecting Thomas Jefferson there, but it stopped trade between U.S. and England, U.S. and France. It got us really not involved with the European side, but we are 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. That helps our economy as well as theirs, and we were a much smaller percent of the population back then, but he was not willing to trade, as he proved with the Embargo Act of 1807. James Madison failing to prepare the country for the War of 1812. While the British burned the Capitol and burned the White House, James Monroe supporting the Missouri Compromise. I used to be more indifferent about the law, but after reading more about this in the Road Towards Civil War class I'm taking in my high school, I can confidently say it was a major cause of the Civil War. It allowed Missouri to be admitted to the Union as a slave state and Maine as a free state. This was to preserve the balance of power in the United States Senate between between senators from slave states and senators from free states. So if Missouri came into the Union as a free state, then free states would have power in the Senate. Presidents at this time were just compromising. John Quincy Adams, poor political strategy. He was ineffective as a president. This one might come as a little bit of a surprise to people. He was a big infrastructure president, but the tariff of abominations is what I would have to say about John Quincy Adams. I'm not particularly pro-tariffs. They make things more expensive for you and me, and John Quincy Adams, that is, signed one of, if not the worst tariffs in American history. We'll get to another tariff with the 31st president there. Andrew Jackson supporting the Trail of Tears. It forced thousands of indigenous Americans from their homes in the South, in places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, forced them just out west to Oklahoma. They were living in South Carolina and in Georgia, but they were forced out to Oklahoma, most with no shoes on, through a long, brutal winter. Martin Van Buren, worsening the Panic of 1837. Presidents don't have as much control over the economy as many people like to think, but Van Buren definitely made the Panic of 1837 worse. The economic policies of Jackson's led into the Panic of 1837, you could argue. So it's kind of that case of one guy's policies leading right into the next guy. William Henry Harrison, that long inauguration speech and refusing to wear a jacket, even though that was not related to his death, but 31 days, not giving him much to work with. John Tyler, the massive conflict with his own political party, making him increasingly isolated. He ran with the Whig Party when he was running for vice president in 1840, but when he became president in 1841 after Harrison's death, he was trying to run for re-election in 1844. The Whig Party supported Henry Clay, so Tyler had to make his own third party run because he didn't really identify with any political party at that time. James K. Polk, increasing tensions in regard to enslavement. His contributions during the Mexican-American War to claim a bunch of new land out west for the United States, pretty much all of this territory was owned by Mexico, and Polk got it for us, which I greatly support, but that did, in turn, increase the debate over whether those states would become free or enslaved, which was a consequence no matter what when we gained new territory. Taylor, refusing to compromise. Taylor did not support the Compromise of 1850, which would have admitted California to the Union as a free state, which he did want, so you should have supported the compromise, my friend. Miller Fillmore signing the Fugitive Slave Act. It was part of the Compromise of 1850. As I think I mentioned in my Fillmore video, it was the South satisfying side of the act, which is true. The California joining the Union as a free state was the North benefiting side, but the South benefiting side was saying that all runaway enslaved people in the North must be returned by Northerners. Northerners had to help. Franklin Pierce, the topic of my essay for this semester, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing Kansas to come into the Union based on popular sovereignty. People of Kansas decide free state or slave state. That election is an absolute disaster. People from all states vote in it, and the Civil War breaks out not long after. James Buchanan doing nothing to stop Southern secession. I mean, he basically said, well, I personally don't think seceding is a good idea, but you do you, South. Abraham Lincoln. You might have noticed a little bit of theme over the last year if you've been watching my videos, but if you got problems with the First Amendment, I got problems with you. And yes, Abraham Lincoln had problems with the First Amendment by suspending habeas corpus. Johnson. I have to say his character for this one. I mean, he fired a senator. You're not allowed to do that without the Senate or the House. I can't quite remember who has the power to do it, but the president can't just say, dude, you're out of here. And Johnson tried to. He was impeached, but saved by one vote. Grant. His corrupt cabinet. Grant trusted way too many people that he probably shouldn't have, which led to him getting kind of bit. But his administration, one of, if not the most corrupt presidential cabinets in U.S. history, and this was in Reconstruction. The U.S. was still healing from the Civil War, and trust in the government was a major necessity that many of Americans wanted, and Grant couldn't give it to him. Hayes allowing segregation in the South to rise by ending Reconstruction. Reconstruction was on its way out by the time Hayes comes into office after the Compromise of 1877, but segregation still got a lot worse. It began to begin, may I say, under Hayes. Garfield, announcing that he was going to the Baltimore Potomac Railroad Station. That's where he was assassinated. He didn't have a very long term. Arthur, the scandal over where he was born. Many people first said he was born in Ireland. After that was debunked, many people tried to say he was born in Canada, and Arthur refused to talk about it. His supporters of his say he was born in Vermont, but he lied about the day he was born until the day he died. Why? What are you hiding, dude? He said he was born in Vermont. Well, he didn't actually say anything, but a lot of people think he was born in Vermont. A lot of people think he was born a little bit north in Quebec. Grover Cleveland, his character. I'm trying to separate person from presidential policies, but it's almost hard to separate those two for Grover Cleveland. Benjamin Harrison, the $1 billion Congress. This was just basically a bunch of way too much government spending. But as for William McKinley entering the Spanish-American War on weak evidence. Spanish-American War, it is shady, man. I mean, I talk about that way more in my video about him. Theodore Roosevelt, while I often talk trash about Teddy's foreign policy, I would have to say the Brownsville affair. This was in Brownsville, Texas, so way south, you can't even actually see. Almost 100 African Americans who were in Brownsville at the time a white guy was killed, and the police said it had to have been their fault, and Teddy was like, sure. William Howard Taft, splitting the Republican Party in the 1912 election. You could just as easily blame Teddy Roosevelt for this, but in the 1912 election, Roosevelt and Taft split the Republican Party vote, allowing Wilson to dominate a near landslide. As for Wilson, civil rights. He didn't want them. However, it was during his administration that women got the right to vote, but that was not necessarily his doing. He supported segregation in federal offices. Harding, corruption, similar deal with Grant. The Teapot Dome scandal was very, very bad as well, but that was kind of linked to the corruption in his cabinet. He once said, quote, I am not fit for this office and never should have been here. I agree. In about a week and a half, I'm posting a video about the 10 worst presidents in American history. You may or may not see Warren Harding on that list. Coolidge, not giving me a lot to work with. Coolidge was actually a really good president, in my opinion, but he ignored warning signs of the Great Depression. Almost a year after he leaves office, Great Depression comes up during the Hoover administration. And we'll get to Hoover in a second here, but historians don't say that Coolidge caused the Great Depression, but His policies slowly kicked the can down the road. Hoover, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, raising taxes, making things way more expensive at a time when that was the very last thing Americans needed. FDR, attempting to pack the Supreme Court. I think that the Supreme Court is good at 9, and presidents often say that they want to pack the Supreme Court, they want more justices, but they would appoint those justices, so the balance in the court would favor the president in power. Japanese internment camps were also horrible. Truman, entering the Korean War without much of a plan. The Korean War, often called the Forgotten War, but it was a bloody, bloody, bloody war. And Truman, it didn't really seem like he really knew what he was doing. He was just kind of going back to war right after World War II just ended. Eisenhower, the idea of McCarthyism, he didn't really confront it early enough before it had become more of a problem with McCarthy. It was just kind of a mess. Eisenhower was also a very successful president, so if I had to pick one, that would be it. John F. Kennedy, Bay of Pigs invasion. That's kind of a layup. I mean, that and John Adams, a major foreign policy disaster about John F. Kennedy, really one of the only negatives from his term. LBJ, escalating to the Vietnam War. Vietnam War, one of, if not the least successful wars in United States history. And Kennedy was kind of already getting us into it, and then LBJ. It was too late. It was too late before he realized all the bad things that he was doing. Nixon, his character, especially in the Watergate scandal. Nixon actually had a lot of good, and I talk about this in my video about him. He had a lot of really good stuff that he was doing, but then the Watergate scandal, now that's all people think of, which is actually kind of brutal. Gerald Ford, the enormous public backlash after pardoning Nixon. Whether it was the right move or not, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments down below whether you would have pardoned Nixon in that situation. We needed to unify the country, and that's where Ford was coming from. We needed to bring this country together. Many people began not to trust the government. Carter, the Iranian hostage crisis. He has spent 444 days, a third of his presidency, trying to get the hostage out of Iran, and then moments after Reagan takes the oath of office, they are released. Ouch. Reagan, the Iran-Contra affair. Reagan was also a very divisive president. He was kind of the start of the really divisive presidents in the modern era, but the Iran-Contra affair, kind of a layup. George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. That was his promise, but he had to go back on his promise. That's never good luck. Higher taxes, Americans just love to see that. Bill Clinton, lying under the oath with the Lewinsky scandal. The 90s were a prosperous time, but Clinton's character really made the American people be like, hey, I don't think I can trust you. George W. Bush, invading Iraq in 2003. Not a lot more to explain. Barack Obama, the partisan tension. I give Obama a lot of credit. He had a very successful presidency, in my opinion. He rebounded the economy after the Great Recession, took out the world's #1 terrorist in Osama bin Laden, and was a huge just inspiration for the African-American community. He's the first African-American president, but the partisan tension that came during his terms, big negative. I mean, that was political polarization like we haven't seen since the Civil War, and we're really still feeling it in 2025. Donald Trump, attempting to overturn the 2020 election with January 6th. President Trump lost his bid for re-election and insisted that the vote was rigged without providing clear evidence. Joe Biden, mishandling the 2021 Afghan withdrawal. That was a huge political failure on Joe Biden's part. So if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel, as that is the very best way to support the hard work I've done over this last year to make videos about the subject I love the most, and I will see you next week for the 10 greatest presidents.